Okay. Hashtag cancelconor. Okay. I'm going to start this with the word of the day from dictionary.com. Vermilion. Defined as a brilliant scarlet red. So we'll try to work that into the...
a brilliant scarlet red, eh?
Yeah.
So like my sash is like a vermilion color?
Yeah, we'll try to work this into the into the conversation if we can. I don't know if we can. We'll see how it goes. Okay. Master Ashton Piercey, why don't you give us a little background on Kung Fu, the history of yourself, and
oh my god,
that sort of thing like that, and kind of give us an idea of what Kung Fu means to you.
Okay, well, let me start with the last question first, because I think that's easier. Because like, if you say like, what's Kung Fu? That's pretty huge. 1,500 years of history. Just, like, there's like 2 highlights and then move on. It's like, obviously stuff was happening. What Kung Fu means to me is kind of the best game of telephone we've played in all of human history. Like, this art, you can't write it down. They didn't have video. And they just kept handing it down from person to person. And a lot of people say, oh, you're not doing it, you know, it's screwed up. Or somewhere along the line, someone took a left turn as opposed to a right turn. But, and then some people added and some people took away and so on and so forth. But for me, Kung Fu is the kind of really about continuation. Right? And people are like, oh, you got to get it on the internet. The internet's forever. I'm like, Kung Fu might be around long after the internet's dead and gone. And, you know, other people are like, well, the internet's dead and gone. It's like, oh, that could happen. It seems unlikely, but it's possible.
Yeah, well, Kung Fu is tested.
Yeah, Kung Fu is tested. It's, you know, so to me, it's like, oh, man, if you don't get it on the internet, it's like, you remember your MySpace page? Everything you put on there is gone. What if everything we put on YouTube and Facebook and all these things just disappear one day? Facebook's already losing relevance. And like, I remember when I was a kid, it's like Kmart was the store, right? And then Sears was like a powerhouse. And now nobody even knows what Kmart is. And Sears is like, have you gone to a Sears in the last couple of years?
Well, there is none. They're a shipping company now. That's it.
Man, there's one up north actually, or there was. I don't know if they're still around, but they were like a year ago, 2 years ago. I went in and it's like it's like discount Walmart. It's really strange to go in.
Yeah, well, it's uncomfortable nostalgia.
Yeah, it's a very uncomfortable nostalgia. It's like the lights are going. There's like no employees, and you're just standing there in like products you've never seen from before. Seems like you're in a cheesy Japanese store, but it's like giant. Yeah, I don't know if it's still in business, but and so, you know, maybe one day Google will just disappear. It's an internet company after all, and people are like, it's $1 billion company. It's like so many $1 billion companies have just disappeared. So who knows? You're putting this on the internet, and it might stick around for my lifetime and maybe the next 20 lifetimes. It may be around forever, or it may just disappear into the ether, but maybe Kung Fu will survive that. Maybe it won't. Yeah. So to me, Kung Fu is a continuation, and it's a form of expression, of individual expression. It's something that I love to do, and that's not me just being cheesy, because I mean I've said it as something where it's like as a cheesy thing, but it's like it's something where it's like I really just enjoy it. During the pandemic, I didn't have to do any training, and I mostly didn't, but I was still thinking about it all the time. And I even came up with things that just happened that are almost like revolutionary Kung Fu ways of fitting Kung Fu together to me. And it's like, oh yeah, you could really mop the floor with this, someone with this. And you're moving half as much and using 1/4 of the energy. It's about maximizing efficiency. It's kind of in a way about being as lazy as possible while still getting the job done. How can you defeat somebody with the one move, just barely being able to lift your arm. Yeah. Can you still defeat your opponent? And it's like, yes. Can you still defeat your opponent, by moving less? At first, when they're teaching you, it's like, oh man, you gotta take a big step out. And then the steps get smaller and smaller and smaller. And pretty soon you're kind of like just dodging punches by like a millimeter. And that's the cool thing. It's like, oh, you're coming at me. Eh? I'm going to slightly move my head to the left. And then, it's like, oh, you didn't hit me.
Yeah, well, that's a good analogy, too, because, like, use this to mop the floor with somebody. It's like, I can also use this to mop the floor with more efficiently.
Yeah, exactly. Right? It's just like, it's not just even about beating somebody up. It's just about beating somebody up and making it look so bad for them sometimes. Or making yourself look cool while it happens. Not that that's super important. But, and sometimes it's the most important thing. But, it's just, every year I get a little bit closer to that thing that I never thought was possible. And I remember when I was younger and I never thought I'd be a black belt. Ever. And then here I am now. I'm a master. And it's just one of those things where it's too interesting to put down. That's the problem with it. It's too addicting. It's like a really good book, but a really, really good book where you cannot put it down. It's like... And then when you're done reading it, you got to read it again and again and again.
And every time you read it, there's something new.
And every time you read it, there's something new. And it's like, God dang it. And you read it again and again. And then, of course, if you have someone like yourself, you can discuss it. It's like, oh, he's read the book too. What did you think of this point? Oh, what did you think of that point? Right? And it's just...
Well, that's what I find is so interesting because, similar to like nature documentaries where you can watch all of this stuff going on about nature and how these things interact with each other, and then watch BBC Planet Earth another full time, whatever the first 9 episodes that they have. And it's like, how did I miss this the last time? Like, there's just so much information here to learn about this sort of stuff. And Kung Fu is the same way. Like, there's so much information that you go over, and then lucky enough to be a teacher, and get to have that experience where it's like, okay, when you learn, it's one thing, but then when you're trying to explain it to somebody and how these things kind of just automatically flow into each other.
Yeah.
And it's so odd because it's like I didn't even mean to teach this person how to do this step, but now I'm going from horse to open X to horse and stuff like that. But it's like, well, we need this for a form anyways. So this is actually going to work out well, and I'll just continue into the form the next time, or at the end of this lesson, or whatever sort of thing. And
and then what one of my masters explained to me is like teaching is so much better than practice because you're thinking it, you're saying it, you're doing it, you're explaining it, you're reviewing it, all in one shot. Like there's so much more that goes into. So it's like in this school, we've given a lot of students the opportunities to teach. It's one of those things where it's like, if you want to get better faster, teach it, explain it, live it, do it, right? And then you also have the added stress of like trying to make it fit that student and trying to make it fit not just their physical body, but their personality, and then back, of course, to their physical body again, and then everything, and also trying to fit just them as an individual in that moment. Maybe they're having a bad day, or maybe they're having a great day, and they're bouncing off the walls, and you gotta be like, okay, calm down. We gotta get you to saddle up here and focus in on one thing. Or maybe they're having a bad day, and it's like, come on, we gotta get you on the horse. As soon as you get riding, you're gonna feel better. But, and then there's just so much that a person can learn from teaching, and you don't even realize you have so much more experience. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, well, it's great for, like you say, like the mental health aspect sort of thing. Like I've walked in here frustrated at life or whatever is going on, sort of thing like that, but I've never left the studio frustrated.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that the more I train with it and understand it better, it's like I understand myself better. I understand that more often than not my problems are minuscule or unimportant in the first place. And it's just like I don't have to do the Kung Fu necessarily because it's not like the punches, the kicks, the blocks are almost nothing of what Kung Fu is about even.
Yeah.
It's like who are you? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, take a breath, reassess the situation. Are you putting too much emotion to this? Like, can you think of a calmer way to get through this situation and why you're frustrated? Cut off in traffic or something like that, or like, and that's the whole thing. Like like Mr. Manuel sold me on the whole the program in the first place, where saying that Kung Fu has nothing to do with martial arts necessarily, like the words themselves, because it's defined as time and effort. So you can make a meal in 10 minutes and you just crank the heat up on high and slap everything together, and it's like, it's edible.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you slow cook your foods and you take your time and prepare your sauces and actually individually prepare things and then combine this as a proper meal and then lay it out and have a nice presentation, as well as just the the food and stuff like that, is like, the whole thing makes the experience better because you took your time and put effort into it. And it's like, well, yeah, like, that's Kung Fu.
And that's actually the other point I was going to get to, is like, especially when you're teaching, I find you're putting so much effort into the student, thinking about a million things. I see now that there were the teachers just standing there explaining something, and they're like sweating. They're just sweating bullets. They're sweating more than the students sweating, and they're even doing the technique because they got a million things. They're like, oh, I got to remember this, I got to remember that. And then it makes, once you've done that, it makes, like, if I go out there and just tell you to do a side kick, that's easy. Because you don't even have to think about it. You've done a million side kicks. But doing the move, so it's, if in an emergency, if you have to fight or if you have to make a meal really fast, it's just like, boom, you make the meal. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's edible. You move on. And that's the same thing about Kung Fu. It's like, if you get into a fight, whack, you hit the guy, he goes down. Maybe it wasn't perfect, but you move on. Like, you run. You get out of there. And that's, so when you really take the time to do something right, when you have to do it kind of wrong, then it's still okay, right? You still you're doing a lot better than when you're really bad at something and then you try to do it in a hurry. It's worse. Yeah. And that's what happens with most people, is they can't fight. They can fight maybe if we slowed it down and did it step by step, but when you have to fight in a hurry, which is how you always have to fight in self-defense, it's always just in a hurry, it's rushed, it's out of the blue, it's sideways. It's always messed up. But if you've done a million times slowly and exactly, it's just like, wham, you can hit it out. It's like, if you ever see like a stay-at-home mother who cooks and cooks and cooks and cooks, maybe 1,000 meals a year, maybe more even, because sometimes one kid wants macaroni and the other kid wants hot dogs. And then,
this isn't a restaurant.
And then dad comes home and wants this and that. But then next thing you know, she's made like 4 meals. Right? But if she's done that 1,000 times, right, sometimes she'll have like 2 things or 3 things going on all at once, handle it all perfectly. Here's your grilled cheese, here's your macaroni, here's your hot dogs, and here's your steak. Oh, I forgot to make myself something. Boom. And it's like, that's 5 meals or whatever, all made in like 1 hour. And that's how it is with martial arts. It's like, once you get the hang of it, you're like, oh, 2 opponents, here, left, right, back, forth, up, down, sideways, and you do 9 things, and you're like, how did I do that?
Yeah, well, the thing is too, like, holding with that analogy, like, the mother's not thinking about the meal she's cooking.
Yeah, she's not even thinking about it. That's the best part. She's just like, she's in another place. She's probably thinking about something she saw on TV or heard about, or she's got music on.
Yeah, kids gotta go to school.
Or the kids are screaming at her or whatever. They're asking, can I have this? Can I have that? You gotta think, yes, no. Wait, did I just tell them to drink bleach? Like, it's like, wait, hang on, come back here. What's that in your mouth? Oh, it's a popsicle. Okay. Like, it's just, and, they don't even think about the cooking. It's just happening because they've trained their body. And how, like, once they get really good at it, how often do they burn things? They still do, but it's like almost never. Like, out of 1,000 meals, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 will get burned.
Yeah, that's because they're folding laundry or chasing somebody outside and like, get back here.
Yeah, exactly, right? So it's like a tiny percentage. And it's the same thing with Kung Fu. It's like everyone's so worried, especially like in the higher belts. Oh, I'm going to screw it up. And it's like, no, you're really not. You're probably not going to screw it up. There's probably like a 95% chance of getting things right.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the part that I've started to realize with how you're basically time traveling constantly, and you're thinking about your lower belts, and you teach somebody that's new to it or a lower belt kind of thing, and they're they're kind of not really sure what it is that they're doing, and you have those flashbacks. It's like, oh yeah, I remember this being really difficult, or my personal experience with this issue of trying to figure this out, and then they're telling me all this stuff, and then I'm just like mesmerized by all this stuff. Yeah, and like you say, they're like the higher belt looks nervous or whatever sort of thing like that. But it's like, how am I going to remember all of this? Yeah. So it's like, oh right. So as the higher belt, like more often than not, if the person's interested in training, they're kind of just mesmerized by the entire thing. Yeah. They're enjoying the experience, and most of us generally are looking for a reason to sweat, or maybe not even be in charge of something for an hour out of the day. Yeah, I know. That's the crazy thing about being sometimes the student. It doesn't happen very much anymore, but when Master Del Coro shows up, or if Master Youngate's leaving the class or whatever, or if Grandmaster's in and I don't have to teach for once, it's just a trip. You don't even realize the whole hour's gone by, and it's like, wow, that was so easy and so much fun, and I didn't even have to think. And like, that's the thing, is like, not being in charge can have its own thing. It's like, oh, I don't have to make a decision for once, finally. And that's one of the things about being an adult. Everything's a decision. It's not a decision if you don't think about it. It's crazy, because some people, they just get dressed in the morning and they just walk out the door. And some people, like, as soon as you become aware of the fact that getting dressed in the morning is a choice, that's when that becomes a real problem. Like, sometimes you do that when you're 19, and it's just like, I don't know how I got dressed. I don't know how I had breakfast. I just had it and I left. Like, I didn't even know. And then it's like, no, that you actually made a choice. And as soon as you tell them that, they're like, oh. Oh. And then suddenly getting dressed in the morning is like a chore. At some point in my adult life, getting dressed wasn't just something that just happened automatically. It was like, oh, this is a choice I make, and I actually have to put effort into it. And it's like, even if I choose to dress in the worst clothes that I can find, or the easiest, cheapest clothes I can find, it's still a choice. And it's like, I made that? And you have to, like, backwards analyze it. And I think that's kind of one of the roadblocks to success for a lot of people, is you think about every single step, and then you have other people who just don't think at all, and they just, next thing you know, they're a millionaire. They've just gone all through everything. It's like, how did you get here? Like, I don't know. I don't even know what happened. I started a podcast, and next thing you know, I have $1 million. I was just doing. Just so everybody knows, I'm not a millionaire. And then you'll be looking back. Oh yeah, I remember when I didn't have $1 million. Yeah. And but it's just not thinking about things can sometimes be the road to success. It's just doing things automatically. But I'm not that kind of a person. Every single thing has to be analyzed and reanalyzed until it doesn't anymore, until you finally hit that point where you're comfortable with it again. Because it's kind of like driving, where you drive, it becomes automatic for a while, then you have an accident, and you're like, I should really think about this. And then you really think about driving for the next maybe 10 years, and then it kind of becomes automatic again, but you're much more aware. You're shoulder checking better, you're looking better. But you always have to be weary of that one moment when something becomes automatic. And it's like, even if it's 99% correct, that 1% can be really crucial and really catastrophic if it goes wrong. Yeah. Yeah. And that's something I think is always interesting when you do, you practice. I mean, we're to black belt, to master level, whatever sort of thing like that, even to green belt. It's like you've done the same thing hundreds of times already at that point, if not thousands. Mm-hmm. So there's a certain degree where you're in a class and it's like, are you thinking about your technique? Are you actually like every portion of your stance, every muscle grouping that's activated, sort of thing like that? Or are you kind of just going with the flow? Yeah. Am I working on something that I've been corrected? It's like, no, I better do 100 of these kicks to make sure that I'm like, maybe 10 of them are good. Yeah. But that's... And then same thing, like you said, with the analogy of the vehicle. It's like, I don't know, there's been a few times where I'm driving home, driving the exact same road, and I'm halfway there, and it's like, oh crap, I've been driving the entire time. My mind wasn't there, but it's just like... I hate that so much. And I kind of like it, but I hate it. The worst part is when you're tired or whatever, and you're on autopilot, and instead of just going to work, you have to make a stop off somewhere else, but your brain's just so used to going to work, you just drive by, and you're like, oh, I should have turned there. Yeah. Oh well, guess I'm going to work. Like, it's like, whoopsie. So that's when the automatic kind of like Yeah, well, that's especially when you have, well, like a studio that you're running, or
Yeah.
like me doing construction or whatever. It's like you get to the site and it's like, well, I can't do anything until I have this started, or, you know, driving to the studio and it's like, oh yeah, everybody's going to probably need to use toilet paper at some point. I should probably go back and get that.
Yeah. Or like, I got to restock the fridge, and it's like, sometimes I'll just be driving and it'll just be like, bye Costco, or bye Walmart. You know, it's like, oh shoot.
That's not even where your mind is. It's like, oh, it's kind of sunny today.
Yeah, you're thinking about something else. That's kind of the best thing if that ever happens to you, like in self-defense. There's two kinds of ways it can go. It can go you're seriously overthinking it, which usually doesn't end well. Or sometimes it just goes well where you're concentrating, you're thinking about it, but you're ready for anything and you're kind of in that zone. But then the best one is, or the one everyone likes the most is, well, I didn't even think about it. I just blocked and hit the guy. And it was bam, bam, bam. And it's like, I didn't even know what happened. I didn't even know I could do that. And then all of a sudden, bam, the guy's down. I didn't even think about it. And that's really awesome. I've had that happen to me like a few times, and where your body just reacts. And I wonder how much of that is because I was reading some things about how the body reacts under certain situations. Sometimes, apparently, if something hits your skin or whatever, the signal, instead of going all the way up to the brain making a decision, processing it, and going back down, it hits your spinal cord. Your spinal cord makes the decision to pull away or to move or whatever. Yeah. And then sends the signal to the brain, oh, by the way, this happened, so I did this. And your brain's like, what? Okay, I guess that was good or not good, but whatever, right? But usually, if it's something you've done a million times, like, say, like taking a step, you walked in, you didn't think about it. It wasn't your brain that did all that work. Your spinal cord did a portion of that just by itself. So as soon as you took the step and you were leaning and falling into the next step, your brain didn't even have to do that. It was just a built-in reaction. So it just goes boom, boom. So it's half the distance, twice the speed, and it's always correct. That's because you've done it so many times. That's the beauty of like the repetition. You've done that block thousands of times. There's a good chance that might just happen without you thinking about it, and then, you know, your counter will happen hopefully without you thinking about it, and it'll be perfect. It'll be nearly flawless. It's kind of like I imagine baseball players or whatever, when they have to catch that ball, it goes flies in, you got to catch it. Like they're not thinking about, you know, the exact physics of it. They're just matching everything up with the line of sight and catching, and it's all happening in the blink of an eye. Like those balls are coming at 90 miles an hour sometimes, and they gotta pick it out of the air, which I think is an incredible skill. But it's a skill. It's not a thought process at that point. It's just a skill.
Yeah, well, it was years ago, but they did a sports or science of sports, whatever sort of thing like that, and they're breaking down a lot of what athletes do, and something like a similar idea, like a quarterback has 5 receivers, and he gets the ball, and basically as it's touching his hands, he's looking down the field. Yeah. And within less than a second, he sees all 5 of his receivers and which one's actually available. Yeah. And he's just starting to take that first step. Yeah. He's watching the whole field, so it's not like he's looking at any one thing necessarily. Yeah. But it's that idea that you have like this focus of what's going on, and the whole situation is happening second by second, and it's just, when they explain it, even it has to be done in slow motion, because it's like there's no way that, unless you're that person, that you'd be able to process any of that. Mm-hmm. But it's like how this play actually works. Yeah, and then when you see it in real life, it's just like, boom! Yeah. They just are handed the ball and they make a toss, and it lands like exactly in the person's range of, you know, usually right in the pocket. Yeah. And while both people are moving and running, and there's an opposing team trying to stop you from doing any of that. So that's like... Yeah. Well, how much your brain has to shut off to say, okay, there's 6 guys in the line that are trying to take me down. Yeah. So I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, I don't have to worry about that.
I'll back up, so I have an extra, half a second to cock my arm back. And it's like, well, those 2 guys on the left side are got pretty good coverage. The guy down the center is never a good thing to throw straight down the center, because he's going to get blindsided. Yeah. And it's like, maybe the guy on the right is going to be available. Or should I just hold it and spin around and go the other way?
As the guy's about to tackle, you're like, spin, toss.
Yeah,
and that all happens in like a millisecond. And like it's all happening pretty instantly.
Well, and even I've noticed that sort of thing too, where working away on something and being kind of aware of what it is I'm doing at work, and there's something that's leaning up on the wall, but somebody didn't put it up. Like it's just leaning there, and it starts sliding down the wall, and I'm doing something, and I see it out of the corner of my eye, so I go to grab it, or I see it falling towards me. So luckily, I know high rising blocks, so it's like I'll catch it against my forearm, but it's like it's going to glance off and hit the floor instead of hurting me. It's like I don't want the material to get damaged, but it's like if I'm damaged, then everything slows down.
Yeah,
and it's like that can be replaced.
Yeah,
but it's just one of those things where having that kind of training sort of thing like that, and after doing thousands of these things where you're kind of just more aware of everything all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I kind of understand why I'm tired and why I need to just shut my brain off when I go home sometimes. Like, yeah, I'll watch 2 episodes or something on Netflix, because it's like I need to just unplug from everything for a bit.
Yeah.
Because you get to be hyper aware of so much going on, and it's like, just driving even. Like I'm thinking about 10 other people on the road because I have to drive down the major highway. It's like, okay, I'm just gonna unplug for a bit, because it's like I need to not be a part of this, or go to the mountains and do some breathing out there, because it's like, okay, everything's just relaxing, recharging, all the things that I think are important or kind of insignificant.
Yeah.
But it really helps with that level of training sort of thing like that, where you have all these huge distractions, and it's good to be aware. But yeah, like there's so much of your life that you kind of realize like what's actually important, and how much of it you can just let slide and forget about certain other portions of it too, because there's too much to think about.
There's too much to think about. Yeah. Well, and the crazy thing is that you'll never know all of it. Like you'll never know all of it. Like no matter how much you try. There's something like 24 hours. It used to be 15 hours, but there's something like 24 hours of video uploaded to YouTube every minute. And you don't even have to do the math to think you can never catch up. Because every minute that you watch a video, there's 24 hours going on. You watch 10 minutes, it's 240 hours of YouTube that you missed. And that's happening every minute that goes by, whether it's midnight or 1 a.m. or 3 a.m. or 7 a.m. And I mean, like, if you've ever tried to even just understand another language or learn another language, and then realize there's hundreds of refined languages with, so much nuance and subtlety in them, if they want to have that, and different portions and things that you could just, like, I'm still learning English. And it's been like 35 years of just being constantly surrounded by English, and I'm still like articulating it and forming it. And people, they say, even those 100,000 words, the average person only uses 10,000 words. And I think I'm probably average, and I probably use that 10,000 words max, maybe 11, but it doesn't really matter, because that's 98,000 words I don't use, or 90,000 words I don't use. But it's just even articulating those 10,000 words in a really articulate structure that conveys the message as convincingly as possible. And then you're thinking about that when you should be driving. It's like, or you should be doing something else, or like, it's weird because they say, one of my students was talking about shower thoughts, and it's weird because you're in the shower, and sometimes it's just so automatic you have nothing to do but think, and the next thing you know, you're toweling off, and you're like, wow, that was a real interesting movie that played in my head for 40 minutes or 15 minutes.
Yeah, and you try to backtrack. It's like, I did get everything, right?
Yeah.
Do I still have soap or shampoo? Like...
Yeah. And that's happened to me, I think only once or twice, but it's like, oh man, I did not rinse out my hair, and there's just a whole bunch of shampoo just lying in my hair. Because I was thinking about other stuff. But
yeah.
And then they talk about Albert Einstein used to walk out the house sometimes with one shoe, and that was just, he just had other stuff in his mind. Can you imagine just putting on one shoe and then just be like, okay, I'm going to work. And just like, yeah.
Something's not right.
Yeah,
it's not really where my mind is.
And then you're like, oh, jeez, got to put on that other shoe. But he's thinking about, the way light bends around the earth and how it has to be calculated and how it's not actually a straight line, but it's affected by mass somehow. And it's like, how do you even like do that mental leap? But
yeah, shoes are very unimportant at that point.
Yeah, right. And apparently haircuts are unimportant too, right?
Yeah, it takes brain power.
Yeah, it's like you don't even have time to think about how my hair looks or if I'm wearing a shoe or what. It's just like I just get other stuff on my mind, right? And that's one of the crazy things. Speaking of learning kind of things that are somewhat interesting, one of the things that I kind of like came to the realization of lately is like you can just take an IQ test again and again and again until you get the number you wanted. Like I've taken IQ tests and I've ranged from 85, which they said like you're mentally retarded, so you know you might have to go seek some help, and then to like over 210. But it's like, of course, if you just keep taking IQ test after IQ test after IQ test, and then it's like I've also had like 130, 140, 115, 100, 99, 90. Like I've had the whole spectrum of intelligence thrown at me, but I've taken like online and stuff, I've taken like 100.
Yeah, well, a lot of that stuff is when they say IQ, it's because it's on the STEM fields is the other thing too. So it's like if you know science and tech and engineering and mathematics, and it's like, okay, well, this person's smart, but then it's like, well, like your dad, Grandmaster Piercey. It's like, well, he may not know a ton about physics or mathematics or whatever, but it's like to say that he's not a genius in kung fu would be a lie.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's like, what are we quantifying a genius as necessarily? I mean, and there's things that I want to be able to learn more from you and from him and from Master Del Coro, and basically from the students that are, well, to have lower belts. Maybe I was almost said beneath me, and that's not the right way to put it.
No, that's not the right way to put it at all.
But it's there's so much to learn and so much to understand that all of it is part of the puzzle that kind of makes us not just a community of like-minded people, but it's like you said at the start, where this is something that's been around for thousands of years. Yeah. And because we understand it and appreciate it and we respect it and we bow every time we walk in the studio or whatever sort of thing, or to each other half the time, even when we see each other on the streets, it's just natural, like Mr. Piercey, Master Piercey, Mr. Maney, like left over right and bow and that sort of stuff too. It's like, we're at the mall, do I do this anyway?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's our life. That's what we kind of chose to do with a good portion of our lives. And sometimes I kind of downplay for the new students. Oh, it's not a big deal, a couple hours a week. But it quickly evolves into like 5 hours a week that you end up spending doing it. And that's just if you're a student. And then some students do more than that, and some students do a little bit less. But the next thing you know, it's like, you do 5 hours a week for 10 weeks, and that's 50 hours. And like 50 hours is also a green belt for some people. Like you can get a green belt in 50 hours, and then you have some other black belts doing 50 hours in 1 week, right? And some people can get a green belt in 50 hours, and some people will take 150 hours. And yet some people can get a brown belt in 150 hours, or almost. Or maybe 250 hours or 200 hours, right? It's just like, it's crazy. But it all depends on the person and the time and everything. And but I also had some students. I always think of the one student I saw him once every 6 weeks. I probably told you the story. Yeah. But I can tell it for the podcast people. But I saw him once every 6 weeks. But he got better every time. And I only saw him once. One class, maybe sometimes 2 in a row, every 6 weeks. So what is that? Maybe 11 times a year, 10 times a year, I see the guy. When I have other students working their butts off, coming in 2-3 times a week, sometimes more, for the same 6 weeks, and they didn't even make as much progress as he made. And he was already a brown belt or a second-degree brown belt. Like, so how do you do that? I'm like, I practice. And, of course, I'm like, well, everybody says they practice. How much do you practice? He's like 6 hours a week. And I'm like, okay, well, I believe you because you get it better every time. And I was like, how how do you practice? He's like, I just go down into the basement and, you know, on a weekend I'll do maybe 4 or 5 hours and I'll do a couple hours during the week and that'll be that. And I was like, well, I guess that makes sense. But it's like, so you never know what person's going through, and some people just aren't adept, at least at first. I know I wasn't adept at first. Some people are really just, they're not going to get it until they hit that 150 hours or maybe 200 hours or sometimes 1,000 hours or 2,000 hours. But if you just keep going, it's not so much about how many hours, it's just about getting better a little bit at a time. And next thing you know, you have like the least adept person who couldn't do anything when they started. You know, they have a black belt and can't kick anybody's butt now. And it's just like, but they sucked so hard. They knew they sucked. I knew they sucked, even though I might not have said it. Like, they were terrible. And I was just as terrible as almost any of them. I was probably the worst, you know. And that's why. But you just keep doing it, whether you realize it or not, and then you get better a little bit at a time. And next thing you know, you're doing things that other people think are impossible, right? And it's like, I used to think black belts were perfect. And then I get to being a black belt, and especially like a black belt teacher, and it's like, oh, you're making mistakes. You're a human being. I didn't even know you were a human being. I thought you were like some kind of like God once you put on the uniform.
No, that's what I always like. That's always a good story I like telling, especially the new students and stuff, where I myself, who am a black belt, like I do forms or whatever, and I'm picking myself apart about it. It's like, oh, I didn't bend this way, or I screwed up on this, or I've been working on this particular thing. Like I got to keep my hand in chamber at this part for like 2 years now. I've been trying to work on this, and I still forget it because it's like my old muscle memory is this sort of thing like that. And the lower belts are just like, I don't know, the whole thing looked awesome.
Right?
And it's like, oh yeah, I remember when I was a white belt, yellow belt, seeing someone like you or Miss Din or Grandmaster show up, whatever sort of thing like that, and they just fly through stuff with like incredible precision, and it's just like, it looks so amazing. And same thing, they're like, oh, well, man, I didn't do this, or I wasn't low enough in that stance, or this was sloppy, and it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. That looked fantastic.
Right? Yeah, it's just, but it's like I know people that can draw, like, and my sister's one of them, but I know so many people that can draw, and like when they'll just doodle something on a piece of paper, and I'll be like, oh my god, and they'll be like, yeah, I'm not very good, and I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like, that's crazy, amazing, beautiful art there. And, but there's so many, that's the other thing too, is that you don't even know what you don't know until you get there. But there's so many levels of something. It's like, I had a lot of time to play video games lately. No reason at all. But, just playing a lot of video games. And it's like, sometimes I'll go through and that's just like, I'll be number 1 rank with the highest kill-death ratio and everything, just clobbering opponents left and right. And then, like, the next game sometimes, I'll be dead last with, like, 2 kills and 18 deaths. And it's like, oh, you suck. So it's just, like, there's just different levels where it's like you can walk, sometimes you can just walk through opponents, and sometimes you can't. But the weird thing is, like, I can't visualize where my own skill level with that, because it changes game by game, even though I'm pretty sure my skill level remains pretty consistent. This is just like one game I'm up and one game I'm really down. And I remember when I was a black belt like you are, and it's like sometimes I would do so well against somebody, and then I'd go fight somebody like Mr. McNeil and just get my butt handed to me 16 ways from Sunday, so gracefully too. It's crazy. Not just like get your butt handed to you and you're hurt and you know they beat you up, but like not have a mark on you, but just to know that you got owned. Like the kick was 1 inch off your eye, and then it's the other spinning hook, and then the tiger's tail, and then the backhand, and you're still standing there trying to figure out how to block the first thing. And it's like the first thing gone, man. You should be blocking this other thing and this thing and this thing. And it's like, and you don't get hurt. It's just like a gentle touch across the face, like with that kind of level of precision. And that was the thing about him and, well, some other guys, but especially him. He could actually touch your temple or touch your face and not hurt you. It would just be like a very gentle side, And he could do that with a sidekick even. He could just gently touch you with it. And, but there's so many people. And then it's like when you're a black belt, it's like, how did I just go from whipping that person's butt? Sometimes it's another black belt. And then sometimes, you know, the one guy would beat you. And then the guy who butt you just beat, he'd go and beat that guy. And it's like, it's this weird triangle. It's like, I can beat up this guy. He can beat up that guy. That guy can beat up me. How does this even work? And it's like, I can beat this dude down. And that guy can beat him down pretty easy. And then he can beat me down like nothing. And it just doesn't even make sense. But it's just how one style fits with another style. And then you have to learn. You have to make adjustments. And sometimes when you get really, it's almost like a cheat code, but once you discover it, you discover this move that always works. And you do it for a year or two until you just get so bored of winning with that move that you're just like, I'm never doing that move again. And then you forget about it for 5 years and you're like, oh yeah, I can just do a kick. This one kick that always works. And it's just like, oh, you're going to eat it every time. And I forgot I could even do that. Or sometimes, finally, after somebody's been beat down in sparring class for like a year and a half, it's like, okay, I'm going to teach you something. I used to use this all the time. Kick. And it's like, it works every time. The next thing you know, they're doing it on you, and it's like, oh yeah, that does work. Darn it, I can't stop that.
Yeah. So. Well, yeah, that's like, Miss Din is a great example of that kind of stuff too. Like a person that's at best half my size.
Yeah.
And to this day, I still can't beat her.
Well, she has so much more experience than you, right?
It's not just experience, but it just like embarrasses me in the sense that she knows my body better than I do. And it's like, mostly because it's like, my size is like immediately, oh, this small person, I should just be able to walk over and clobber, sort of thing like that. She's like, she's expecting that. Yeah. She wants me to think like that and do that.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, bring your so-called power over. I'll show you what I can do with it. Yeah. And yeah, I've been spun around or almost put into the splits, and it's like, you shouldn't be able to move me this easily. I can't move myself this easy or gracefully.
Yeah. Like, well, yeah, and it's just one of those things where it's like kind of like what you said about a person knowing themselves, knowing you better than you know yourself. But again, I would say that's just comes with time, comes with experience, and it also comes with her experience of knowing her own body and knowing what she can't do against you. So all these things that you're expecting that because I could do it against you, but she can't do that against you. She has an entirely other strategy that your brain has never even seen before. So it's like you're watching a movie as she spins around you, locks your leg, and drops you. And you're like, how did you... I didn't even know that was a thing as you're on the ground begging for mercy or whatever. I think your camera just died.
Oh, that one, yeah. I think
dun, dun, dun.
Battery's probably out on that one.
Dun, dun, dun.
That one's fine, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's probably all good.
Good enough. I'm still here.
Right?
Right, we're going to move this one over so it's side view for both of us.
Right? Well, that'll be more interesting. Because you got to have the... no, I think you got to get in there, too. I think it can't just be, like, me.
Wide?
Oh, yeah. But you're still only focused.
Okay.
You got to turn it.
Put it in front of this guy. You can only see the back of my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was the interesting thing, though, too, where there's people that have certain levels of training and understanding, and like somebody like Mr. McNeil, great example again, where he's been somebody that very knowledgeably understands your belt, what it is that you know, and spars exactly to that level. Mm-hmm. And then you start pulling out a few things, and it's like, oh, okay, so you're ready. And then he goes into a stance I've never seen before, and he doesn't look at you. Yeah. Yeah. That's the other thing. His eyes kind of just go to the side, and his hands and feet are in different positions, and he sees you obviously, but he sees you as an entire person and everything that you do, so that
don't walk into that.
Of course, that's the first thing I did.
Don't walk into that one. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. It's like, don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah, false opening kind of stuff too.
Yeah,
it's
you're
like,
dead.
Well, he expects me to come in this way. okay, so don't do that, or the instant he sees my weight shift to a different leg, or my eyes dart to exactly where I want to attack. It's
God, don't do that one. That's way too easy for him.
Yeah, and then it's like, okay, there's a reason why this guy's a 4th, 5th, 6th degree black belt.
Right.
When I was still, watching him get his degrees of black belt faster than I was getting my orange yellow stuff. He
went through a lot. Like he went through his own little personal journey there to get that.
Yeah.
Like he was bounced around in degrees, unofficially, officially, and all that during a whole bunch of stuff that happened. So, some days he'd be ranked 4th degree, and then some days he'd be ranked 3rd degree, and sometimes he'd get his 3rd degree again, and he had already been training for whatever. But I mean, he's one of the few people under my father who managed to get a black belt in 5 years, which is
wow. Yeah,
it's unheard of.
I was kind of fast at 6.5 years.
Yeah, I know, right?
And
that's crazy fast, and I'm proud of you for doing it. But that's crazy fast. But 5 years is it's nuts.
That's an understanding for one, but a level of dedication that is kind of unmatched. Because I know, part of the reason where I definitely had some level of natural ability, not to toot my own horn or anything, but I do. I'm somewhat athletic.
Oh yeah. Oh, I wouldn't say you didn't have natural ability. You did.
But at the same time, though, too, it's like I understand why I was a green belt for 2 years.
Yeah.
It's because it's like, well, you have a good amount of knowledge. It's like, well, I want more belts. It's like, well, you're not good at what you're doing yet. So figure that stuff out. Then we'll give you another belt.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, there was it's. Oh man, there's a lot to unpack there, but it's,
right?
But it's like starting with the 6.5 years it took you to get your black belt. It took me 15.5 years or 16 years to get my black belt, and people kind of laugh at that and go, "Oh yeah, right." And it's like, no, for realsies.
Yeah.
And granted, I was a terrible student for many of those years. Probably half of those years I barely trained at all, and then some of those years I was training every day 2 hours a day, so it just kind of varied. But it's still a pretty incredible accomplishment to get there in 6.5 years. But it's like I know you've been kind of stuck at 1st degree black for a long time, but you might be there for a while yet, especially with the pandemic and everything. But I mean, it's like, but wait till you get to 2nd degree black. It feels like a million years. I mean, there's so many times. Even when I was at 2nd degree black, and I'm a teacher, and I was full-time teaching at that time, and I was really dedicated at that time. Even training after work and training before work and training on the weekends and teaching on the weekends and everything else. I still was at 2nd degree black for a long time. It felt like forever. But I was okay with it because it was like I screwed up so badly on my 1st degree black test. I wanted to do so much better, and then I did so much better on my 2nd degree black. I was just happy, I was just satisfied. It's like, I don't care if I ever get 3rd degree, and that I don't curse myself for saying that, because maybe that mentally prepared me for how long it seemed like it was going to be. I trained and trained and trained until I apexed at what I thought was the apex. At the time, it's like, oh man, I'm apexing. I'm hitting everything. I've kicked as fast as I'm ever going to kick. I've punched as fast as I'm ever going to punch. And that may have even been true. I may not be able to outspeed my 2nd degree black belt myself, but I can still beat his butt today. It's like, oh yeah. And even my father, who's a grandmaster, 10th degree black belt, he's like, I'd kick my own butt 5 years ago. And it's like 5 years ago I was younger and stronger and faster, but it's like now I know so much more. He's like, I've refined my techniques to a level that 5 years ago me had no idea even existed. And that's the weird thing. And it's like, you, a 10th degree black belt, hadn't you already refined everything to the refined? He's like, yeah, I had thought so. And then there was more. And he's like, even when my grandmaster was teaching me, he had said to me, he's like, oh man, I've discovered a way to beat everybody. And he's like, every conceivable opponent by hardly moving. And it's like, and he was telling him about how he had discovered this new kind of type of training where it's like you just barely move and you can defeat your adversaries. He's, no matter how old you get, he's like, you'll probably still be able to do this into your 90s, which is good because he's 90 now, right? So probably can definitely do that.
But and that's kind of the interesting part of a lot of this stuff too, is that there's so much to learn, and like when you're getting up in the belts and it feels like a race, and I'm sure you were frustrated, especially being Grandmaster's son, where it's just like, well, I did all this work already, and like I'm so good at this, like I deserve my orange belt or I deserve my blue belt or whatever.
I was a yellow belt for like, oh god, years.
Yeah, but then it was just it was like, it felt like a race to get to a black belt.
Yeah,
and then you get there and it's like, I kind of don't really know anything still.
Yeah, I felt that way after the test, I'll tell you that. It's like, oh, I guess I got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
And the best part about being a black belt is nobody cares anymore. It's funny because they all say congratulations, they smile, they shake your hand and everything, and it's all great. But nobody cares anymore if you go any further.
No.
Nobody's like, oh, are you going to get your next belt? It's like, nobody cares. It's like, nobody. Are you going to be a black belt forever? Nobody cares.
Yeah.
It's like, are you going to stay the same and suck forever? It's kind of what I feel like they're saying to me, even though they're probably not thinking that. They're probably thinking congratulations. But it's like, in my mind, it's like, so when I look them in the eye and shake their hands, it's like, oh, are you going to suck forever now? Like you're just going to stay at this level forever? Yeah. But also at the same time, they're like, I don't even care if you do. It's up to you. And that thought kind of drives you crazy for a while.
Well, that's the other interesting part of this system is that there's the Shaolin side of things, and then you get into the White Tigers, which, spoiler alert, there is no spoilers on this, and this is honestly about as much as I can talk about it. But it's... You realize that there's so much more to what's going on.
Yeah.
So the fact that you get a black belt, and it's like, well, there's 10 more degrees of this, so there's probably things that Grandmaster isn't even taught his son, you, or things that his wife, Master Del Coro, were just learning about. It's like, there's probably forms that he knows that he can't teach most of us until we get way higher. So it's like, well, what does that mean even? Like, how much more does he know that, like, how do I have to basically like chase him to his grave to get some of this knowledge?
Well, but that's the wonderful thing about the world, about that infinite thing, is that infinity goes on forever, right? And when you're talking about knowledge or art is a type of infinity. It's like, there's a couple of ways to think of it. You got infinite left and infinite right, infinite up, infinite down. Well, which one's the infinite? And then you have infinite out, just expanding outward in like an orb or like a triangle or whatever. So which one's the real infinite? And they're all real. And it's like, 2, 4, 6, 8. You can do that for infinity. Or 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. You can do that for infinity. And then you can go negative for infinity. Or you can do 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, all the way up to 1, 1.1, 1.2, or 1.11, 1.112, 1.113. You can do that for infinity onto itself. So Kempo is like infinity for me, but just in Kempo, in one direction, right? And the 18 Shaolin motions as a type of infinity, but in another direction, right? And then you have White Tiger, which is infinity in another direction. Like, it's just a way of doing the exact same thing, but there's an infinite way of doing it. It's kind of like, people have been making art for, thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. And it hasn't stopped evolving, right? Like, it just doesn't have an end point. So it's like, I think that's the lesson with Kung Fu, is that it just doesn't have that end point. It just doesn't, you can just keep learning through infinity. And I think that's why things go on for like a long time, and like they keep adding more forms and more forms. And like with this system, they have to take out a whole bunch, because the Shaolin at this point, they have 36 or 37 main weapons that they train. And it's like, we're just going to stick with the 2. You have to just, at some point you have to say no and work on what you have and then go from there. So it's like 37 weapons. Well, that's going to be an entire lifetime. And that's why in the Chinese systems they use sashes, and they don't even They don't even really use belts. They're just like, 10 years, here's a sash. If you do another 10 or 20 years, we'll give you another sash. You know.
Yeah, well, there's actually a bit of a interesting meme that somebody put up that is also into martial arts. It said something about that, and it's a person standing beside a redwood tree. Yeah. And it's the person's the black belt, and it's like the redwood tree is all of Kung Fu knowledge.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah. And somebody made a comment about it, like it being something about commercialization. It's like, well, that's one way to look at it, but the other thing is that it's just in general, like you realize the more you train, the less your belt actually means even.
Yeah.
Because it's significant. It signifies like some level of knowledge that you've acquired, but it's like who you're becoming is far more important, and the training, like you say, is infinite. So it's like, and I've been asked that before. It's like, well, what are you training for? And it kind of stumped me for a second. It's like, well, yeah, I'm not a competitive fighter. Like we do self-defense, so everything I'm doing is just for my own safety and my own mind. And it kind of stumped me, but it's like, well, I'm training just to be healthy and a better person. I guess I don't even really know how to answer that, but it's like,
well, that's like asking an artist, why do you paint?
Yeah.
After they've been painting forever.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, I don't know. It's just, you just kind of have to once you, it's nice to express yourself in a way, and it's like everybody's got something different, right? It's like asking a photographer, why are you still taking pictures? Even if you've maybe taken the best picture. And then like everyone agrees, well, that's the best picture, period. You've mastered it. Why are you still taking pictures? And it's like, I don't know what else to do. This is just what I do now. This is my thing. It's like, asking someone like Jimi Hendrix, like, why are you still making music? I think he's gone now, but it's like I mean, or like even Michael Jackson. It's like, why was he even bothering to make music after he made Thriller or whatever? It's like, what? You just did it. You're perfect. It was a perfect album. Stop. He's just like, no, I'm not going to stop. It's like, you don't need any more money. It's like, oh, maybe I need more money, but it's not even about the money. And that's the thing about like the commercialization of Kung Fu, and it's like, I would just keep doing this if money didn't even exist. If money didn't exist, this is what I would love to do. As a matter of fact, the only thing I hate about this job is the money. That's the only thing, and it's not even that there's not enough of it for me. It's just that I would eat rice and have for how many times, and I mean, like, I'm sure Mr. McKinnon has told you about how many times he saw me eat oatmeal just out of a cup because it was all I could afford. I would literally pour oatmeal into a cup with some water and just eat that, and like I knew what I was doing, like it wasn't like but it was just like, oh, I have no money. And yeah, sure, I could probably leave this and get a job and make minimum wage somewhere, or $50,000 a year working in construction or something. I could probably make more money doing anything else, but I want to do Kung Fu, so I'm going to eat oatmeal out of a cup because oatmeal costs $2 a bag. And so I just take water from the thing, put it in the cup, run the tap in a cup, and eat that. And it's like honestly, if money didn't exist, or if the COVID payments, and I thank you, Canadian government, for giving us the COVID payments, but if money didn't exist, I would still be doing this. And if the COVID payments could continue doing, forever, and they would keep subsidizing the rent and everything, I would reduce the price even more. Like I'm not doing this, for money. I'm doing this just because I don't know what else I would want to do. Also, I think it would be really hard to have a boss at this point. I've been my own boss for 10 years, and I think it'd be really hard to think, hey, Mr. Piercey, or hey, you, pick this up. Can you move this box over here? And it's like, yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
But
that's exactly my thing about it too, is that it's been such a huge positive effect in my life.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
And a lot of people that have known me for a long time, like people I was just working for.
Yeah.
I'm still doing the construction thing, but it's like, I'm so glad you found Kung Fu.
Yeah.
And it's like, partly because I was a little self-destructive.
Well, and that's the whole thing is, just your story gives me hope for so many other people, because I know people I never used to know anybody because I only did kung fu. I didn't have a girlfriend, didn't have any friends. I stopped talking to my family, basically. Just did kung fu 48 hours a day for 2 years or whatever. But and I started getting out there even more so in the last few years. And it's like so many people are on a self-destructive path, and it's like I hope they find something that changes their life and makes them a better person and helps them, get over whatever. And it's like, yeah, they can. It doesn't necessarily have to be kung fu. It could be anything. But I hope they find it because people need something. And that's the other thing too is like why are you still doing kung fu if you've got if you're just doing it for self-defense? It's like I could have defended myself 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Take your pick. I could have defended myself a long time ago, and I'm still doing it. It's because of that positive force in your life. It's like there's nothing else I even want to do. One, this feels better than all those other things, but also it's like I'm not destroying anything. I'm not even destroying myself. I'm actually helping people, and that feels really good. And that's kind of a selfish motivation, but it's like, and I'm getting better at something, which is why video game addiction happens, right? It's like, oh, you got to the next level, and you got to the next level, and you got to the next level, and your character's level 50 now. And one of my best friends, who was a student for like a day, he was like, when I was talking to him after I hadn't talked to him for 5 years. That's the great thing about really good friends. If you don't talk to them for 5 years and they're still your friends. After I hadn't talked to him for 5 years, I was like, dude, it's like I don't even know how to talk to another human being right now. All I can do is talk about kung fu. It's like I don't even know what I'm doing. He's like, I can understand that more than a little. Yeah. He's like, I was playing this video game and I got to level 10 and 20 and 30 and 40 and he's like, I finally reached the max level, and it's like I told my mom, it's like, Mom, I reached level 50, and she's like, okay. It's like, but that's the highest level. Okay, all right. It's like, what does that mean? It means I can't go any further with this character. They've maxed out, and it's like, all right, well, good for you, son. It's just like it doesn't mean anything, but it's like he also just kind of hit this level where it's like for him, that was all he was thinking about, was just getting to that level. And now they fixed that with video games. They have no upper limit. You can just your character can hit level 65,000 or whatever. Yeah,
I'm gonna go use the bathroom real quick.
Yeah, for sure.
If you want to start talking about the mind and body connection.
Oh, the mind-body connection.
I really want to get into that part.
Oh, God. Okay, guys. Well, he's gone. We're going to talk about the mind-body connection. So, kind of like what I was saying before about how things are subconscious. So, one of the things you learn in Kung Fu is that you actually learn how to listen to your body. You actually learn, you learn the hard way or the easy way. The easy way is when your master says, listen to your body, don't hurt yourself. And the hard way is where you just stretch that little bit too far, do something, and then you hurt yourself. I don't know, is that what you were talking about? Like more like how like if you don't listen to your body you hurt yourself, or
well, there's that, but there's also the whole idea where this system is set up for self-defense.
Yeah.
So everybody thinks it's like, well, you have to protect your body. It's like, well, no, that's again, it's like the punches and kicks aren't really there. Like we're training our minds and stuff like that just as much as our bodies. So like Grandmaster, we'd go to his place and we're running up a mountain or whatever, and then you sprint at the end, and then you do 50 push-ups and 50 sit-ups, and then he tells you, okay, I'm going to teach you how to drink water now.
Yeah.
And it's like you had to do all that other stuff just to get your mind into the state where it's like where I need you to be, so you understand what I'm about to tell you.
Yeah.
And there's so much of that because, especially now with today's technology, there's so much disconnect between mind and body where we think that they're separate, but they're not. I mean, yeah, my foot is a long way from my face, but that's still me.
Yeah.
So I got to take care of my feet because they carry me around everywhere.
Yes.
Right? So, and that's the same thing too, is that if you're not taking the time to meditate or to understand how you connect your body to your mind, or why you need to focus on why you need to do a better side kick or whatever sort of thing like that, where it's like, okay, do 100, but how many of them would you actually be happy with?
Okay, so you the crazy thing is you jumped the gun a million miles when you said mind-body connection, because to me that's all way after the middle step, which is what you just said, training the mind. That is its own thing. Part of training the body is training the mind to train the body to do what the mind wants, but that's the connection there.
See, I jumped the gun.
Yeah, you jumped the gun. But the funny thing is just training the mind. Yes, is kind of its own thing, and then training the mind-body connection comes after. So it's like it's body, it's mind, and then mind and body. So that's like I couldn't even fathom what we were getting to when you said mind-body connection. So I kind of jumped to the very basics of like. Good. Like the mind can hurt the body if you're stupid. Okay, so but you're like, oh yeah, so you get the mind all trained up, and then you can actually have the mind communicate with the body. But it's like I remember I just said to the camera about listening to your body so you don't hurt yourself. But then that actually can become, it's weird because your body's communicating with you. You can communicate with your body, but it's a two-way street, and what creates that two-way street is the subconscious mind. And then I think what you're kind of talking about is how I was going to write this down as you were saying. I had so many things, but I have the paper right here. But what you're talking about is like getting the conscious mind to talk to the subconscious. I think this is what you're talking about, so that you can control your body subconsciously but consciously. And
partly, yeah.
Well, that's like this is like I'm in beginner mode, so explaining it to somebody who doesn't have any frame of reference. Okay, so we train breathing, right? Mm-hmm. And that breathing, you're always breathing subconsciously all the time. You're just breathing and breathing and breathing, but you can breathe consciously. You can actually breathe and consciously be aware that you're breathing, and you can control that breath. But if you do that enough times, for over enough minutes, say 10, 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes especially, of consciously breathing in and out and in and out, you actually start to build a connection between your subconscious mind and your conscious mind. It just gets them used to talking to each other, because the subconscious mind is used to being in control of that all the time, right? But when you consciously breathe in and consciously breathe out, this is really where that mind-body connection or conscious, subconscious body connection happens, is that you actually connect all of them together into one thing. Like you actually can, but once you build that connection between the conscious and subconscious mind, you can control other stuff. That's the crazy thing. Body temperature, for instance. Like by controlling your breathing, not just controlling your breathing, but also having access to your mind, you can make yourself warm in a cold situation or cool in a hot situation. You have a much greater degree of latitude in your body temperature, so you can handle heat better and cold better just through training, provided you don't have any predisposition to one or the other. But if you have even just a moderate level, more than just physical training, because sometimes you'll see professional football guys out there, they got 0% body fat and they're huddled up in a jacket and it's like minus 10. And there's other people that doesn't bother. But even if you're normally bothered by weather, is like you can take a lot of that mental aspect and just change your body temperature just by thinking it. But then it gets really crazy, is like you can move your hands subconsciously without thinking about it. Is like you can actually, like once you've made a fist enough times, you can actually make a fist just by visualizing it, right? Or you can do a punch just by visualizing it without actually consciously sending the impulse even once. Just by having your mind think forward or backwards into guard, it can just go out and go back. And that's the beauty of the mind-body connection, is you think what you want and it just happens without that. But then getting to the really crazy deep part is like when you can feel your heart beating, but not just feel it beating inside your chest, but you can actually almost feel like you can control it. When you've hit that level of like, this is my subconscious mind doing something, but it's like you've built such a connection with your subconscious mind that you're like, okay, slow it down.
Yeah.
Slower.
Well, and that stuff is...
slower. Now fast. Now slow.
That stuff's like really amazingly functional too, because I didn't think that would be possible. And and it's one of those things where it's just like, it sounds like we're talking about like the woo-woo kind of, oh yeah, you can make your heart beat faster or whatever sort of thing. It's like, well, you can. I mean, just by hyperventilating, you can speed it up. Yeah. But the other thing that I've noticed though too is like I'll go to a gym or something like that, or I'm out of town and I'm staying at a hotel or something, and get onto an exercise bike. Yeah. And same thing, it's like I'm at 160, 170 beats per minute because I'm just pumping something out. But then I focus and I actually think about my breath and I think about my heart rate, and I really focus into my body. Yeah. And it's like I need to slow this down. Yeah. So it's like I'm not pushing any less hard. Like I'm keeping my RPMs up. Yeah. I'm keeping the tension on the bike or whatever that I'm using. But it's just like I can bring my heart rate down by even 5 beats per minute. Yeah. Just because I'm focusing on what it is that I'm doing. Definitely. And it's like, okay, like there's no way I could have done that before. Yeah. But it's like it takes that time to figure out like what is it that my mind is not doing. Well, and that's where meditation really comes in, is like you really have that moment to just examine your own thoughts. Like you really have that moment to just like sit and let your thoughts just kind of happen. But instead of just like, oh, I'm driving and I was thinking about something else, or oh, I'm taking a shower and I was thinking about something else, it's more like I'm here and I'm thinking about this, and I have no idea where this thought came from. Yeah. But it's like, and that doesn't even matter, but it's just like I'm here and I'm thinking about this. It's really thinking about something with purpose or with deliberately, right? And that's really where meditation comes through. And if you're not kind of a deep person, you'll have a different moment to it. And even if you are a deep person, you'll come across this if you meditate enough, where your mind just simply goes blank. And then it can go blank to different degrees. And the scary, dangerous, maybe not dangerous, but very scary moment is when you lose all track of time in a moment, and you're sitting there by yourself, no TV on, no anything, and you're meditating, and then all of a sudden you're like, where am I? What am I doing? Am I even alive? How long have I been doing this? And you hit this moment where you forget that you're alive, that you're even a being, that you even exist. Yeah. Well, there's a separation between you and your mind at that point, because it took me a while to kind of understand that philosophy, and that's not even something we necessarily teach here per se, but it's the idea that you're not your mind. Your mind is kind of an engine that keeps you safe and alive, and stuff like that. It's not necessarily who you are as your conscious self. Yeah. Or subconscious self, even, sort of thing. And that's where that question came from, is like, am I even alive? Do I even exist? Where was I? Yeah. Where was I, even though I was here in my body? Yeah, and exactly. And your mind all of a sudden starts to try to do math and quantify what just happened. And it's like, no, that was still me. I was still here, obviously. Yeah. But I was just like, I don't remember where I was or what I was doing, even though I was just sitting here meditating or being in the moment. Yeah. And that's those are really, really important to have. Like, you need that to survive, and I think that's why people sleep, is like your body does some of that mental processing by itself. And that's the one thing I actually really wanted to touch on too, is the fact that everybody can meditate. Yeah. And there's a lot of people that say, oh, I don't like meditation, or I can't meditate, or it's impossible. It's like, so you've never sat down and just breathed for 5 minutes? Yeah. What do you do every night before you go to sleep? It's like you kind of meditate yourself to sleep almost every day. Mm-hmm. I mean, sure, we sometimes have the TV or something on in the background for noise or whatever sort of thing like that, but in general, like your mind starts shutting down and you don't hear that stuff anyways. So like at some point, like your meditative self is there. So for people to say that they can't or they don't, it's false for one.
Yeah.
But for two, it's like if
well, they just don't know, right?
Well, that's the thing, is they may be afraid, or they don't try, or there's some people that are afraid with their own thoughts.
Yes.
Which I kind of didn't understand until I've heard studies where people that would rather what was it? No, it was a shock thing where they would rather sit there and have something shock them than sit there in a soundproofed room, like one of those ones where it's like you can't make noise in it, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, you can, but there's no reverberation, not like this room there is per se.
Yeah.
But it's there's some people that have such a hard time sitting alone with their thoughts that, well, I mean, it's been considered torture even. I mean, that's why solitary confinement in prisons is like the worst thing you can do to a person.
Yeah.
Right? Put them in a room with, a bunch of murderers and thieves and all these horrible people, but it's like, we're going to really punish this guy, so we're going to lock him in a room by himself.
Yeah. No friends for you.
Yeah. So that's the interesting thing too, where, I mean, meditation, obviously we don't want to just lock ourselves in a room for weeks at a time, sort of thing like that. But the other part of it is too, is that if you can spend 5-10 minutes just focusing on your breathing, and for me to understand too that there's several different kinds of meditation. Is what I didn't understand. I just thought there was this one thing. It's like, well, no, right?
I know.
But that's the thing. It's like, well, no. There's the mindful one where all you're really doing is focusing on your breath, and every time your mind strays, you kind of bring it back. But then there's the opposite, where every time your mind strays, you think deeply into that thing, and then there's also the healing type meditation where you do a bit of anatomy research on something that you have injured, which Grandmaster loves doing, and then you focus on that while you meditate. And I mean, especially if it's a guided one that he does, where you kind of go for a journey, and it's a trip almost. It's a trip inside your mind, and it doesn't take drugs or anything, because your mind is already a machine that does so much for you.
Yeah.
So it's something that you can go deep inside, and like Grandmaster says, I mean, your body knows how to rebuild itself. So if you just focus on it and let it do the job that it knows how to do, that it's going to regenerate itself the way it's supposed to. Definitely. But it's like you cut yourself, it's like, well, it's going to heal. Sure, there might be a scar, but even in 10 years, that scar is almost gone. Yeah,
well, I mean, meditation is really any time you're aware of your thoughts.
Yeah.
Or you're not receiving any new information at all. So it's not like you and I are talking, but if we're just silent for a few seconds, then that's just a hint of meditation into itself. But if you're not receiving any new information, that's a type of meditation. But when you become aware of your own thoughts, that's really meditation. Like, I can't even argue with that. If you're not receiving any new information, maybe you were just sitting in a quiet room for a couple of seconds, right? But if you're sitting there for an hour, you're automatically meditating because you become aware of your own thoughts. Unless you have something where you're not aware that you're thinking, and you're just there for an hour, and like you can feel the clock tick every single time, and like you don't miss a single second of that. But if you've ever looked at the clock and looked away and looked back up, there's a decent chance you're meditating. And that's becomes...
Well, I mean, even in itself, like what you're explaining there, it's like you're focused that well on the clock. It's like you're kind of meditating into the clock and into time then.
Yeah,
so
exactly. So it's like anytime you're really aware of your own thoughts or not taking in new information, you're meditating. And then the other side of that too is where the creative side of your brain, sometimes if you're a really good typer and you can type subconsciously, or you can write subconsciously, or you can paint subconsciously, you can paint, or you can do something, you can get creative. Like for me, I can do Kung Fu. I had an epiphany just out in the hall, in the middle of quarantine. And it just happened subconsciously. And for a moment there, everything just kind of came together. But it's all, that's where the meditation becomes creative, when it takes that creative side. And I think that can only happen with things you've already done before. But, or at least maybe where you're building off something you've already done before. But essentially, anytime you hit that creative stride in your moment, that's also a type of meditation. Really, meditation is just mindfulness of a thought process. So if you're doing something mindlessly, like playing Mario Kart 64, and you're not really trying, but you're trying, then you're kind of in that moment of like, you're doing something else with your mind. You're active learning or active playing or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But once you hit that moment of like inactivity, that's meditation. So, but awareness of that inactivity is really what it is. If you're inactive and you don't realize it, that's just sleep.
Yeah.
But if you're inactive or just lying there or staring at the ceiling, but if you're inactive and you are aware that you're inactive and you're either doing it deliberately or with purpose of any kind, that's meditation. So that's essentially, you can do the dishes while meditating. I used to walk while meditating. I would do that for hours. So I would walk around and I would do the slowest lumber. If you ever saw me, it would be like one step every minute. But I would just walk and just be completely in another place while I was out walking around. I used to do that living in a small town. Don't do that so much in the city. I feel like it's a little weird. But plus also you can walk into traffic, whereas like in Gleason, you're not going to hit a car isn't going to hit you like they're used to moving around cows standing in the road. So it's just like, oh, there's action. Let's just pull around. How you doing? Good. I'm doing great. I'm having a great time out here. It's like you're walking pretty slow. It's like, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Or you just walk out there for like, sometimes I'll walk out to like, we have like an actual little forest area. I'm very blessed for Alberta because a lot of places don't even have any trees anywhere. We have a couple of different areas with some trees. And you can actually go out there and just walk and just like really be in the moment for a little while. Sometimes it doesn't always happen. Sometimes I go out there hoping it's going to happen and it doesn't, where I'm not able to get into that zone. But a lot of the time I would go out there, whether I was expecting it or not, I'd find myself in that zone. And I was just like, wow, this is awesome. And it's just like, it's one of those things where it's just awesome to just be alive. And it's a great feeling. It's hard to get in the city as all the construction's running by and things are beeping and da-da-da. But you can hit that moment where it's just like, I'm alive. And you can feel yourself breathing, and it's like, this is amazing. This is incredible. Like, if you ever take a moment to study anatomy, it's crazy. It's insane. It's not simple at all. People are like, oh, it's simple. It's like, no, it's not. It's not even close to simple.
Quite the opposite.
You have a billion things going on all at once, and you're alive. Like, just think about that. You're alive.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that there's a bunch of dead things that make you alive.
Yeah. Right?
Or
semi-living things.
Inanimate things.
Inanimate things, yeah. Yeah, and it's just like, you're alive. This is a big deal. Like, just to even take a breath and have, like, oxygen go in and carbon monoxide come out, carbon dioxide come out, and just, like, have all these different things happening. Just that reaction by itself. You breathing air in, which is, what's air? It's like a fluid that exists on the surface of the earth that you use to stay alive. Without it, you're dead, but you don't even know what's happening. And the weird thing is, it's like, you're under 2,000 PSI of air pressure. And it's like, if you go to space, you're at negative PSI. And if you go to the bottom of the ocean, it gets too high and you'll die. We consider ocean level 0 PSI, but it's not 0 PSI. It's 2,000 PSI. Like, you'd be a blobfish if you came out. That's what blobfish are actually, like, fish shaped. But when you take them out of the depths of the ocean, they just expand into this big thing. Now, it's us. We're just under a lot of pressure right now. We don't even realize it. It's 2,000 pounds of air. You're moving all the time. Yeah. But because it's both up and down, it's effortless. Right?
Well, that's just it. We're like lobsters that are at the bottom of the ocean. It's just that our bodies are perfectly pressurized to it, so it doesn't seem like it matters even.
Yeah.
But... Well, that was the funny thing, actually, that you were talking about that whole thing where our anatomy and stuff like that. Like, there's a new show on Netflix about the human body.
Oh my God! Right?
And it was funny because I was watching the one about breath and pulse and stuff.
Yeah.
And they used, I don't know if they by chance had some connection to Grandmaster or something else. But it was that exactly what Grandmaster had said, though. It's like you can go for about 3 weeks without eating, about 3 days without water, but it's like you can't last 3 minutes without air.
Right.
And it's like, it's so amazing because it's like, yeah, we're just constantly unaware of all this energy that we're walking through and just take for granted because we're on the surface.
Yeah, exactly.
And even just climbing up a mountain or whatever, it's like you're starting to know, or hiking even, like walking up a mountain.
Yeah.
You start to realize that it's like, oh, this is getting tougher just because the air is, like, there's less air to breathe here.
Yeah.
That's why I'm getting tired so fast, or like my thoughts are starting to get foggy, or...
Yeah, no, it's just like, but that's pure energy in a way. It's just around. It's just in the air, and we're just breathing it all the time, and that's incredible. But you don't even know that it's happening. But it's just like,
well, the analogy they make, it's like they're like, yeah, it's like you have a steam powered something or other, and you're shoveling coal or wood into it constantly. It's like, well, no, that's a bad analogy because the air is what's burning.
Yeah,
it's not the material. Like it's an oxygen reaction still, and it's the reason why we breathe out carbon dioxide, why things rust, why it's all oxygenation.
Yeah, right.
So it's amazing like how functional and abundant this thing is that we just take for granted. It's constantly here.
Well, yeah, and then you got to think like gravity. Every time I can pick that pencil up and drop it every time. It's 100% reliable, and it's like we don't even know how this stuff works, or it's like it's not been explained to the likes of me. And like I've been looking, I've been asking Google, what is gravity? It doesn't know.
No. Well, they even talked like it's like, well, gravity is what we call it, and it works locally. But it's like to actually explain it, it's like it's the line of curved space that you have to basically accelerate just to stand still. Yeah. And it's like, wait, what? No, wait, say that again?
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And it's like, how does that work? So is it just being curved downwards towards us, like all the time at a constant rate? And it's like, yes.
Yeah, and that's the weird thing about it. It's like, well, there's people that explain it, like Veritasium does a great job of explaining that kind of stuff too. But it's like, we'll just call it gravity because it's what everybody understands.
Yeah,
you know, like there's so much of that of life in general sort of thing like that too, where we're just like, well, we'll just tell them this because to explain it, I'm going to need a day.
Right, and there's no guarantees you'll understand it after one day.
Yeah, and that's just it too. It's like when people get me going like on Kung Fu.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, how much time do you have? Because it's like, I'm going to try to shorten it as much as I can, but it's like, once I get going...
Yeah, that's like a 2-hour thing.
There's so much that I can explain about it and how it works with every aspect of your life. And it's like, you use Kung Fu to make everything easier and better. Like, it's just... And I'm a little biased because Kung Fu is my thing, but at the same time, it's the dedication and focus towards something.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the other thing we could talk about too, is where Kung Fu is not the best art. And then I know you've done video blogs and stuff like that about exactly that kind of thing, because it's like, well, for competition measure per se, no, because
it's a whole different set of rules.
Well, that's just it. It's like we learn self-defense where somebody's attacking you with a lot of force and anger, and they're trying to take something from you. It's like, well, I'm going to make sure that me or my mom or whoever is safe, sort of thing. But it's like you go into a ring.
Well, like, that's a whole different set of tactics, because your opponent isn't just running towards you, and you can't run away. You have to move sideways, and you can't just deal with one attack and be done, because they're not going to attack and leave their head open for 5 minutes like a normal attacker would in real life. They're going to attack and pull back to guard and jab and hook and do all these other things. Yeah. Pull back to guard. But also, it's like in the ring, you know, if one of my yellow belts wasn't thinking about the rules, or one of my orange belts wasn't thinking about the rules, you can kick somebody in the groin. like it's like we can do that without thinking. It's like if I was playing by their rules, it'd be very hard because I don't understand the rules. I haven't ingrained them into my subconscious.
Yeah.
I haven't looked over them 1,000 times and lived it. But it's like, if I'm not thinking about rules, it's like, wham, kick to the groin, wham, elbow to the face, wham, grab the hair, punch to the face. Like, there's just a lot of things you can do in real life that you can't do in the ring. You can't grab somebody's hair and like punch them. You can't touch their eyeball in the ring. Like you can't kick them in the groin. You can't hit them in the neck.
Yeah, break their arm, kick their knee backwards.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, like 60% of the stuff that we train, we're not allowed to do. So it's like, well, no wonder why the Kung Fu guy loses in a ring all the time.
Yeah.
Like,
well, it would be very hard to win. Like, when 3/4 of your training is that. And it's like, people who do... One of my students, like, has someone in their life that does jiu-jitsu, and it's funny because, when you see jiu-jitsu, you only see the top guys in the world doing it. But, like, when you see amateurs doing it, like, if you ever just Google jiu-jitsu and have, like, 2 guys in the yellow belts, it's kind of ridiculous. I hate to say it, but it's like, dude, I could have ripped your eye out 16 times by now. It's like, oh, man, your throat's open, your eyes open, your ears are open, your hair is open, your groin's open. Like, oh, I can break that pinky, that finger, this, that. I can do a wrist lock there. Oh, I can break this leg. It's like, there's dozens of things. But the truth of the matter is they're just really into, like, especially Brazil. Well, I'm only speaking of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. The classical Japanese jiu-jitsu, I think, is amazing. It's wonderful. It stems from Kung Fu, from what I know, and it's beautiful. But when you get into Brazilian jiu-jitsu, especially the current iteration of it that's very popular, is they're mostly focused on utilizing body weight and locks and holds using just the arms, which is the larger limbs, right? Like, it's like, no, people have pinkies, people have thumbs that you can break, people have eyeballs you can scoop out, they have throats and necks, and they have groins, and there's just so many soft spots. And it's like, so in the UFC, it's like, everyone thinks it's like, hey, I've watched boxing, and it's cool sometimes, and I don't like Floyd Mayweather as a person. I think he's a jerk. But he is a jerk. It's not that I think he's a jerk. He's a 100% is a jerk. It's factual at this point. It's not like I think he's a jerk. He is a jerk. But, I mean, he can box like nobody else. But boxing isn't a real fight. However, if somebody said, hey, are you going to, like... Would you rather fight a guy who has boxing or a guy who has nothing? It's like, I'd rather fight the guy who has nothing. I don't want to fight a boxer if I can fight someone who has no training. Boxing is obviously way better than nothing. Yeah. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is way better than nothing. But it's not like you can't beat a boxer. You can't beat these BJJ guys that are on TV. Again, remember, it's on TV. It's on TV. And it's like, even when you're watching late night shows and they're having a conversation like we're having now, it's pre-rehearsed to a large degree. Like, they have a script and everything. It's still television they have to follow. Now, the funny thing is like, I don't know what to think of podcasts, because it is just 2 people talking. But still, I'm censoring myself a little bit, for your sake and also for the sake of the viewer. There's some things I would just never say to you, even though I might think them. I'm not going to say every stupid thing that happens, right? And that's the whole thing, is like, even if you're getting in a ring and even if it's just the 2 of you, you're still censoring yourself. You're still holding back lots.
Yeah, you're not actually trying to kill the person, but it's like you don't want to lose either. So it's kind of an interesting line to fight. And even hearing people talk about it, that they're like, oh yeah, like, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is the best. It's like the only way you can do MMA. It's like, it's the best. It's like, well, it's the best for competition because you can hurt somebody without killing them or giving them some level of life-altering injuries. Yeah. Is where, well, like even our version of sparring, where it's super respectful and it's like virtually no contact.
Yeah,
and
right.
Because it's like, even what we're training, it's like, well, yeah, we're teaching to kick each other's ribs in and all this kind of stuff, but it's like lightly tap at best, and then if you get the point, step back, bow, set up, and start again, because it's like, it's super easy to get heated, and
that's the only reason, really.
Yeah,
it's not that you couldn't ever spar and not bow. It's just that for everybody, it can get out of hand. It can get out of hand between 2 masters, even though they usually know better. But it can get out of hand anytime, although masters know that they know that they don't know that they know that they don't know that they know. But this is just the whole thing. It's like you've been through that a million times, so you kind of know not to kill the other person. But it's like, I can even think back to when I was black belt or whatever, things just get out of hand real fast. And like, especially when you started sparring, you came in after things had gotten really, really out of hand a number of times, 100 times with a number of people, but especially that one time. And then it was like, all right, no, we're not doing this anymore. I'm sick and tired of seeing people get hurt. I'm sick and tired of seeing fingers getting broken and people screaming at each other in my kung fu studio, trying to kill each other in my kung fu studio, or almost killing each other, point where they have to be ripped apart. And it's like, and even in the letters, they're like, I was prepared to kill that person. And it's like, they wrote me letters after I requested it. It's like, I want to have your account of the incident. And it's like, I was prepared to kill that person. And the other person, without me even realizing, they're like, I was prepared to kill that person. And it's like 2 separate letters from 2 separate individuals. And they were that close to killing each other. And it's like, well, I mean...
Yeah. Well, and you're kind of missing the point of the training. It's the other thing, too. Like, you're doing a great job. Like, you're looking to win. But at the same time, that's also kind of the... Well, like when I was doing medieval sword fighting, it's like the whole idea of going green or hulking out. It's like you turn into a rage monster that all they can see is how to win.
Yeah.
And it's like you're missing the point of the training here. I mean, the whole idea is that we're here to better ourselves, not by doing that by putting somebody else down or breaking them apart.
Yeah.
And like, getting to the point where I'm looking to kill somebody, it's like, ugh. I mean, I grew up on a farm. I can't even shoot gophers anymore.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's great. That's that respect for life and all that coming through. And I feel like farmers have a really hard job because they're part of their job is killing things, right? And it's just like mentally, I can't get over that. And yet, that's why I'm a vegetarian. Mainly, it's like I can't get over that. Yeah. It's like, and I don't want somebody else doing my dirty work for me. Not like that anyway. And it's just like no. It's like there's no way I would want to kill something, and there's no way I would want to be killed. Why would I expect someone else to do that for me? It just seems dishonorable. It seems rude. It seems impolite. And it's like I feel like, but for the people that have to do it, like I know people that grew up on farms and they have to become killers. And one of the things when you watch like, you know, forensic files or whatever, they're like, oh man, they killed small animals when they were a child, so of course they're going to grow up being a killer. It's like, what about all these people that grew up on farms? Are they just naturally psychopaths, like all of them? Yeah. And it's like, I don't know. Probably not. I hope not, because some of these kids I know, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's always the thing too. It's like, well, how did they kill them?
Yeah.
It's like, well, what? We're now going to make a subjective scale of
exactly.
How killing something is important.
Like, yeah, exactly. And it's like, well, he used a baseball bat because nothing else was available. And it's like, I guess you had to, man. Like it's like I want to tell these kids that it's like killing is wrong. But it's like, well, no, I had to kill that animal. That's what, like, it's not even an option. Yeah. And, like, you can see the hesitation in their eyes, or sometimes it's like, I didn't want to kill it, but it's like, I had to kill that gopher, skunk, snake, coyote, whatever. It's like, I had to murder it. If I didn't murder it, it was going to destroy our family farm, or whatever. And it's like, well, I guess you had to, or like a badger or whatever. There's like a dozen animals, even in Alberta, that can just walk onto a farm and destroy it. Yeah. It's like a rabbit. One rabbit can wreak havoc. Well, one rabbit turns into 50 rabbits pretty quick, right? But it's like they can just, as we see outside the studio half the time, and nobody minds. We're out there feeding it and giving it food. Farmers are out there like,
what are you guys doing? But that's the thing too. It's like you wouldn't think, well, gophers are just, prairie rodents, sort of thing like that. Who cares? But it's like, well, if you have a cattle farm, and they break a leg, it gets lame and then it takes off because they don't stick with the herd because they've injured themselves. They go into shock. They move along. So it's like now we have to go find this cow and likely have to butcher it and lose money, sort of thing like that. It's like, okay, we're going to eat still, and we're probably going to butcher one anyways. But it's like, how often are you going to let this happen?
Yeah.
Before it's like, well,
how many times? Like until you have so much meat you can't fit it in your freezer anymore,
or you can't sell it to anybody, or
whatever. Yeah,
because it has to be government grade, is the other thing, sort of thing too. And it's just like, well, they're rodents; they multiply like crazy, and if we can at least curb the population to a degree, it's like it's for the benefit of us.
Yeah,
and But it's just like, and it's a perspective thing. It's like, well, all murder is wrong. It's like, well, murder is actually between people, so to say that it's murder isn't right. But it's like, if you're a vegetarian or a vegan or something like that, it's like, I respect what you're getting at.
Yeah.
I understand that, yes, all life is important, but I mean, you kill vegetables nonstop. I'm getting beside the
Vegetables
point.
don't have a nervous system. Vegetables don't look you in the eye.
Yeah, exactly.
Before you kill them, they go like.
They don't have their soft eyes and say, "Oh no!" But I'm kind of getting beside the point here. But it's the other part of it is that it's also the idea that we're doing this for not just our benefit, sort of thing too. But there's everything. Like we
all need to eat. Like. What are we gonna do? Stop killing animals? Like,
well, yeah, and they said too, like they had to clear cut forests when they started building towns and cities in Ontario.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, what would you do that for? It's like, well, where were we going to build our houses?
Yeah.
It's like we needed to get wood for one, so we'd have something to burn to heat our houses, and take all this stuff down. But it's like, well, from a squirrel's perspective.
Yeah,
you're an absolute
you're a monster.
You're a monster. You're creating genocide here, basically. The squirrel just needs that tree. That's what he doesn't need anything else. And then for us to walk in and just like, oh, whatever, away it goes.
Goodbye.
So it's like it's all a matter of perspective, sort of thing too.
Well,
so
and it's like maple syrup is tree blood, man. Like
it's totally metal.
Yeah, it's just like I'm just drinking tree blood. And someone was on TV. It's like they're gonna make you drink vegetarian beer. And it's like, did you think that went through?
Is there any other kind?
Yeah, right? Exactly. Vegetarian beer. It's like, I hate to tell you this, but it's all vegetarian. It's been vegetarian for a long, unless you get the rat in the bottle, you know, like.
Yeah, okay.
It's just like they're gonna make you drink vegetarian beer or vegan beer. And it's like, yeah. Probably. Yes, they are. Yeah. It's the leftist agenda, man.
Yeah.
All the vegetarians are coming to get you.
So preposterous. Getting a little off topic of kung fu stuff here. But,
I know, right? It just happens.
It does, though. And whatever, it was bound to happen.
Yeah.
But I mean, getting somewhat back to the point too. I mean, it's that idea where last week I did vegetarian, probably because it's my own little thing for my own health and stuff like that, and if I can slow down some of the production and stuff that helps the rest of society. I know, again, one person isn't a huge thing, but it's like if everybody slows down the amount of meat they eat instead of just you don't have to stop altogether.
No.
But the other thing is too is that I know for my own health, and I'm a good enough cook that I know I can go for a week or a couple of weeks, sort of thing like that, so I can help cleanse myself, have a different, palette of cooking different things too, because I challenge myself then. Because it's like I know how to cook. I mean, I made that eggplant lasagna.
Oh man, that lasagna!
Right?
Jeez, that lasagna was so good.
I know. I think
that lasagna was crazy.
Honestly, I think about bringing you a tray every once in a while.
Oh man, you should. You should. I will eat that entire tray.
I'll probably make you half a tray, but
maybe in one sitting. Like it'll be gone.
But that's the thing. It's like
that lasagna was so good.
And
I wasn't even hungry that day. Like I deliberately came in not hungry because I didn't want to just like because sometimes I get eating and like that's it, and then, like it would have just been all over my clothes, all over the table. I would have just had like 40 plates. There wouldn't have been food for anybody else, even though you cooked for like 40 people. I'd have just eaten like 3/4 of it. So I was just like, no, I'm not doing that. So I ate a lot before I came in and I was stuffed, and that lasagna was so good. And I was like, why did I do this to myself? I want to have like 40 pieces of this. And I probably could have if I hadn't like down like half a jug of Metamucil before I walked in the door. It was like, oh man,
keeps regular.
Oh yeah, man, and it expands too. Like you ever like leave that in the cup for like 5 minutes? It just it's like it becomes Jello. Like it's just like and it becomes it gets harder and thicker and bigger as time goes by. So it just keeps expanding. And I had I'm pretty sure I did have like 11 scoops of this stuff. And just walked it back. So but that's normal for me. Like I can do that anytime.
Yeah, but that was also one of the things that Grandmaster would get us to do is to go vegetarian, if not doing like the full-on master cleanse or whatever, before we'd go and do training with him. But it's like I was like, well, what's the difference? But I was also like, well, I've never actually done vegetarian like full on for weeks at a time. So it's like, well, this is a great challenge for me now.
Yeah.
So it's like, what is this going to actually add to my training? It also, helps my cooking repertoire. But at the same time, it's like, well, the whole idea is the mind training.
Yeah.
Sure, we're going to do hundreds of push-ups and probably pull a boat while he fishes and
Yeah.
and do all this other stuff. But it's like the food is all the energy that you need on top of the fact that we're again breathing the air, which is actually where the energy really comes from in the first place. Like the food definitely helps, but it's like I'm overweight, not a lot, but it's like I definitely have enough stored energy. So
right?
it's like I can.
Well, you always do. Like
there's always
even if
something.
you have 10%, even if you have 1% body fat, if you're 100 pounds, that's 1 pound. That's 3,500 calories.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're 200 pounds, if you're 1% body fat, which obviously you're not, or nobody is,
Yeah.
but that's 2 pounds of body fat. But if let's say you're 10% body fat, that's 20 pounds, and you'd still look shredded at 10% body fat. But that's 20 pounds, and that's like 2 weeks of food you have just stored up in your system.
Well, and it's not to say that nobody's like that. I mean, that's kind of the thing about anorexia.
Well,
That's where people's bodies are. But at the same time, though, too, it's like it's the idea that we're not machines is the other thing, too, where it's like your tank is out of gas. You're not driving anywhere. You're out of gas.
Well, 1% body fat is dangerous. Like
for sure it is.
2% body fat's dangerous. Even the best bodybuilders in the world, 3% I think is as low as they go.
Yeah.
You start getting down to 2, you're in a danger zone of like, you could just give out. Because it takes calories to get that going. Oh, it's dead. It's dying. Guess
all the batteries died.
The TED Talk is over. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk on everything.
Oh, whatever. We're almost 2 hours in already, actually.
Yeah, it's all good.
But I mean, the whole idea though too, the fact that
is the laptop's still recording, so it's audio only.
Yeah, it's still audio at this point.
It's an audio only podcast.
Yeah, whatever, no big deal.
The screen just goes blank, and then it's like just add in a little cut for a long time, and then it's like, and here we are continuing on.
Yeah, I can do the rest of my phone.
Yeah.
No, but it's kind of that idea though too, that if you have that drive and sort of thing too, where you have that idea of if you can focus your mind into your body and have more energy constantly, and it's like, I mean, we can get into chi and stuff like that. We'll maybe save that for the next time, but
it's another 3-hour conversation.
Well, that's just it. I mean, I've kind of planned on coming back and talking to you eventually at some point anyways.
Sounds good.
But with that said though, I mean, there's so much that we already have that we're constantly using, and it's like there's so much that can be utilized. So it's just it's the whole idea of like, where I kind of, I guess, wrap up the whole mind and body connection sort of thing, is that it's something that it's super functional for everybody, and if you just allow yourself to be a part of it, because it's like your body wants to do good things for your mind, and your mind wants to do good things for your body, but our willpower and our laziness and convenience of life is there. So it's like, how much do you truly want it? Like, are you going to dig for it? Are you just going to let it go by, kind of thing? So
man,
there's a lot to it.
You truly want it. Well, I think that's I think that's why like some people are successful in sports, right? Is they just are willing to go through the pain and the suffering and whatever to get where they want to be, and some people aren't. And I think that's really the difference. I think lots of people have potential to be number one in lots of different sports, or to be just as good as the number one, but they're not, because that as soon as that pain starts, as soon as that pressure starts, as soon as that having to give in, as soon as you feel that burning in your lungs, it's like, do I keep going or do I give up? And some people give up, and then of course, like, some people push themselves beyond natural human limits because they're taking drugs or whatever, and then it's like, do I want to take drugs to get to that level? But talking about your point about vegetarianism is after doing a bunch of research on who lives the longest. So let's just say meat eater is kind of like your standard, and then you have vegetarian and vegans and vegetarians with supplements, vegetarians who occasionally eat meat, vegans who have supplements. So, in a natural environment, vegetarians actually die sooner than meat eaters. And vegans die sooner than vegetarians. So, if you just are a pure vegan and you don't, in North America, drinking tap water. Now, if you're drinking water out of a lake, you get different vitamin B supplements, whatever. But let's just say you're drinking just tap water, right? And you're a regular vegan and you just eat fruits and vegetables. There's a very good chance you will die long before someone who eats meat. If you're a vegetarian, same thing. You will die long before someone who eats meat. Now, a meat eater, let's say that's the standard. A vegetarian who occasionally eats meat is the longest person will probably live if they don't take any supplements. So let's say you're vegetarian most of the week and you have, say, 2 or 3 meals with meat in it. Statistically, that's going to give you the longest life, right? Without taking supplements. Now, the funny thing is, the scale flips as soon as a vegetarian takes the supplements they need, especially vitamin B12 and some other stuff. But there's some essential things that you don't get in a regular vegetarian diet, no matter how hard you try, in current North American standards. Because before, even if you were a vegetarian, you're kind of always eating bugs or whatever. But now everything's washed, everything's clean, and you're not getting the nutrients in the dirt, believe it or not. You're not getting some of that, which you can get from meat, but you don't get just like in a regular washed vegetable. And of course, you have to wash your vegetables down because pesticides, right? So
yeah.
It's not like you should just be eating dirty vegetables and like absorbing the pesticides. No, you have to wash it off. But if you take the right supplements, you'll live longer than the vegetarian who eats meat occasionally, and a vegan who takes the right supplements. It has to be very specific, right supplements. If you take it all, you'll actually surpass everyone and live longer than anyone on the list. So a vegan who takes the right supplements will live the longest on average, period. But a vegetarian who occasionally eats meat will have statistically in North America might have a life into their 90s. Whereas if you're just like a regular meat eater, 70s. If you're a vegetarian who occasionally eats meat, like I said, 90s. And then you can even live past that. If you're a vegetarian who supplements properly, you can live like 92, something. And then if you're a vegan who supplements properly, you can live like 93, 94. You can live longer than anyone. And the funny thing is, it's even further back on the scale. If you're a vegan who doesn't do any proper supplements and just eats Oreos because they're vegan, you'll die at like 40. Yeah. You could die at like 40, 45. If you're a vegan for 20 years and you don't take any supplements, you're dead. So what you're doing is actually, to give you some props, is probably the healthiest way to live. Mostly vegetarian diet is actually, without taking any supplements or anything, the proper supplements, then you're actually going to live the longest natural life that you could, really. So
yeah, and that's a tough one too, because it's kind of a generalized thing, even at that, because there are people that's
generalized, right? Exactly. Yes.
To the individual, it's like some people have whatever issues, or they can only digest certain things, or they actually need certain meat proteins because there's a lot of stuff that doesn't work for them. There's some people that have no problem being vegetarian with virtually no supplements. Mm-hmm. And there's tons of proteins in beans and amino acids from all kinds of other things, and like potatoes are huge. I mean, if they're still cool with eating eggs and drinking milk and stuff like that, I mean just survival. I mean, you could, if you really needed to for whatever reason, survive on milk and beans. Yeah, you could. It's
for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, probably wouldn't be the best for you, but I mean,
the crazy thing is that I never knew how easy potatoes were to grow, and I've finally watched like a YouTube video on it. And it's like, oh jeez.
They grow in your cupboard.
Yeah, but I never realized that. It's like, just put them in the ground with the eyes up, and that's it.
Slice them in half,
or slice them in half and
throw them in the ground. That's all we ever did.
Jeez.
Yeah, the only issue is that if you get potato bugs, then it starts eating the plant and it kills it off faster. But other than that, though, like that's really your only concern. Like
can you do anything about that other than pesticides, or?
Well, you can go and pick them off by hand.
Would that actually work?
It takes time. It's just depends on how big your potato field is.
Yeah, but if you had like 5 potatoes.
Oh yeah, it'd be super easy to take care of them, or grow them inside your house, and you don't really have to worry about it.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but yeah, I mean, that's why it was such a staple for a lot of European people for the longest time, because it's like this is one of the easiest things to grow, and it can feed tons of people.
Yeah. Right.
But then you have the blight, where Irish people were totally screwed over. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, they have to move out of the country. And then, they were the lowest of the immigrants at the time, sort of thing like that. And they got criticized for whatever, sort of thing like that. And it's like, well, they're dying people. But I mean, what did you think was going to happen? It's like their main staple. It's like taking rice away from a third of the world. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, what did you think was going to happen? Like, they're going to be okay with that?
Yeah. No. But it's like potatoes are really easy to grow. And it's like, I never realized that, like, if the apocalypse happened, they're like, oh, how are you going to get food? And I never realized that you can just, like, grow food in a yard.
That's why I had to stop watching Walking Dead.
Right?
That show was...